Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Railroad Grade Crossing Accidents. A highway rail grade crossing is a location where a public highway, road, street, or private roadway, including associated sidewalks and pathways, crosses one or more railroad tracks at grade. There are approximately 220,000 railroad crossings in the United States, of which approximately 137,000 cross public roads. A collision between a train and a motorist at a grade crossing occurs approximately every 2 hours. Half of the crossing accidents happen where there are active warning devices, and more than 60% of the accidents occur where the train speed is less than 40 miles per hour. Approximately 20% of the accidents involve cars running into trains. During today's program, our presenter, Dr. Carl Berkowitz, will discuss components of a grade crossing, factors influencing highway railroad grade crossing safety, reducing highway railroad crossing incidents, and the future directions in railroad crossing safety. The presenter for today's program is Dr. Carl Berkowitz. Dr. Berkowitz has 48 years of transportation and traffic engineering experience. He has served as a litigation consultant and held various positions in industry, government, and higher education, with extensive experience in planning, design, safety, security, construction, maintenance, operations, and management. He holds a BCE in civil engineering and an MBA in industrial management from the City College of New York, and an MS in transportation planning and a PhD in transportation planning and engineering from NYU Poly. In addition to his work involving pedestrians in virtually every form of transportation and its safety, including aviation and maritime, Dr. Berkowitz has written numerous reports and articles for major publications, chaired task forces, appeared on national television and radio, and made numerous scholarly presentations worldwide. He holds memberships in many transportation professional associations. Dr. Berkowitz's areas of expertise include accident studies, slip, trips, and falls, pedestrian accidents, perception reaction capabilities, subway and commuter rail accidents, speed and distance analysis, and railroad grade crossing. Dr. Berkowitz would like to take questions throughout the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat or Q&A feature located on the right-hand side of the screen to submit your questions. He'll do his best to answer the questions as they come in. We encourage all attendees to submit questions throughout today's presentation. Tomorrow morning, I will send out a link to the archived recording of this webinar, and we do ask that you take time to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen after today's program is over. I now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our distinguished presenter, Dr. Carl Berkowitz. Carl, the presentation is all yours.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'm looking forward to this presentation. As Matt mentioned, the principal topics I'm going to cover today are components of grade crossing, design considerations, and solutions. And as was mentioned before, the number of accidents, but when you look at what's happened over the last 2 decades, there's been a decline of about 45% in the number of accidents that occur between trains and vehicle traffic. And we'll see why this is happening. Some of the factors that have been uncovered as to what influences the safety and what can cause accidents are such things as commercial driver safety and how well the driver is trained, how easy it is to see the locomotive, which we call locomotive conspicuity, how reliable the motor vehicles itself, as we're seeing, vehicles are getting better and better, less defects. They're operating many, many more years without having failure. How is the intersection designed? Is there a clear line of sight down the track? How is the crossing maintained? In terms of freight trains, is there reflectorization on the freight rolling stock so it's easily visible at night? And of course, pedestrian safety. These are the keys to a safe railroad grade crossing. one can't help but pick up the paper every day and see an accident that has occurred at a grade crossing. And here's just some examples of some of the recent grade cross accidents that have been reported in the paper. Despite everything that we've been doing over the last several decades in terms of trying to improve railroad grade crossings, such as improved signs, gates, early warning devices, there's still many, many accidents. And these accidents are very costly and result in property damage, large medical bills, legal expenses, and in many cases, unfortunately, people do not survive these accidents. There are, in the United States, a total of 211,000 grade crossings, and this is a little bit less than Matt mentioned earlier. He mentioned 220,000, because every year there is a reduction in an attempt to reduce the number of grade crossings by closing some of the grade crossings. In terms of the number of grade crossings out there, 130,000 represent what are called public crossings, and the other 80 or so thousand are what we call private crossings. Some of the safety issues that have been directly identified, and here you see in the picture below somebody just nonchalantly with their skateboard crossing the tracks. We see from time to time, and I've unfortunately witnessed this in my own community, where drivers drive around the gate, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. Except in the movies, that's the only place that one should race a train, and that's in a movie. In real life, one should never try to race a train to a crossing. It's not unusual. It happens from time to time where vehicles and pedestrians are caught between the gates and on the track system. Sometimes we have stalled vehicles, and we've read about those not only in the movies but in real life. The vehicles do get stalled on the tracks. I just was in conversation with an attorney where a person was crossing in front of a train that had stopped, and behind that train that stopped, a second train came, and you know what happened there. And one, not expecting a train any time, I was out just the other day investigating a railroad crossing, and I was taking pictures, and maybe I was 3/4 feet off the right-of-way, and this train just creeped up on me. I never heard of the train, and fortunately it was going slow, and the train operator recognized me. Even though I was out of right-of-way, he did slow down for me. Remember, trains can't stop quickly, and whenever somebody crosses, it should be at a designated crossing. Pedestrians see some kind of glory in walking on railroad property. This is not a good idea. Crossing should be at designated locations, and crossing tracks immediately after a train passes, and sometimes that second train is coming the other way. And one should never cross a crossing when the gate is down. This is something that seems almost logical, but somehow people don't find it to be logical. Some of the root causes of accidents at crossings are the type of hardware that's used, the vehicle, the visibility between the vehicle and the train, the geometry of the crossing, the sight line, how conspicuous the train is, are there any obstructions such as vegetation, is it a large right-of-way with a number of tracks, does the roadway cross flat or is it on a grade? And what are the general road conditions? These are some of the root causes. As Matt mentioned earlier, there's a crossing accident every 2 hours, and that motorists are 40 times more likely to be killed at a crossing than in any other vehicle accident circumstance. Half of the accidents are where there are active warning devices, and more than 60%, as was mentioned, of the accidents occurred where the speed is less than 40 miles an hour. And we talked about 20% of the accidents involve vehicles. One of the reasons that in addition to the improvement of intersections, another reason that the crossing accidents have declined is because we reduced the number of crossings. And that almost seems like a no-brainer. You reduce the number of crossings, and of course you're going to reduce the number of accidents. Studies have been done to determine what are the leading accident causes. Some of these are drug and alcohol use, inattention by either the vehicle operator or the train operator, misjudgment. It's very hard sometimes to judge the speed of the train and how far it's away from you, violating the traffic rules, unable to stop appropriately, disregarding a signal, as you can see in the upper picture there with somebody going around the gate, unaware of a train. I had that experience, as I mentioned before, weather conditions, and sometimes, unfortunately, the warning system at the crossing is not functioning correctly. Here's a breakdown of the last 7 years, and you can see that in 2004 there were approximately 3,000 accidents, and in 2010, the last fully recorded year, we don't have full figures in for 2011, you can see that it's been declined about 30%. But the amount of deaths is still unacceptable at 256, and serious injuries at 850. This 1,000, almost 1,100, is still unacceptable. At public crossings, we have various types of controls. We have gates, flashing lights, other active signals, crossbuck signs, stop line signs, and other passive devices. And this gives you the breakdown of how they're used at the 130,000 public crossings. Let's take a look at pedestrian incidents. Between 2008 and 2011, there were approximately 500, and in 2010, from January to November, right now the accidents are only reported through November. You can see that there's been somewhat of a decline in 2011, but in general, statistically, between 2008 and 2011, there has been not much of an improvement in terms of pedestrian injuries at crossings. This is a breakdown, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. This is by the different types of vehicles and how they contribute to the amount of injuries and accidents that occur at highway crossings. You can see that auto is number one and bus is the last of the principal modes of transportation. So we're looking at the top 10 states in terms of accidents. Texas leads the way, and number 10 is Kentucky, and where I am right now in Florida is number 9. But every day I pick up the paper and there's an accident, and sometimes I get a feeling that maybe Florida is moving up in the pecking order. Pedestrian behavior is very important. The pedestrians tend to, when they cross, they tend to look down and not looking to the right and to the left. They're worried about tripping on the track, and by them looking down, they're not developing a keen awareness and maybe being distracted from paying attention to a train that's coming to their crossing. As I pointed out, I was out there taking pictures, and the train just creeped up on me. The other day I was on a rail platform, and I was talking to a person who was injured from a train passing through a platform, and we were talking, and I wanted to take pictures of trains coming through the platform and also maybe measure the speed, and the train came on so quickly that I didn't have a chance to turn around to do any of those things. The various participants, we have the railroad, and that's the train, the track, and the warning system, and the operator. On the highway side, we have the driver, the vehicle, maybe the pedestrian, the roadway, and those information systems that are out there. The railroads have responsibilities, and we have responsibilities too. The railroads are responsible for the signage at the crossing, the flashing light signals, the gate mechanisms. The government is responsible for all the advance warning signals, the markings on the roadways, and any supplemental signs that they may install, such as the cross sign with the R&R. We, as drivers and pedestrians, we have responsibilities too, and our responsibilities are to obey traffic laws, the rules and warning devices, and we, in order to be able to be good drivers and pedestrians, we need information so that we can make the proper decisions. Some of the decisions that we need to make is the time to the arrival of the train. If we see a train out there, how long is it going to take to reach the crossing? We need to know how much time we have to decide to cross or not to cross, and we need to know how long it takes to complete the crossing in total. There are a ton of misconceptions out there, and they're important to take into consideration. Trains cannot stop quickly. They don't run on predictable schedules. Some of the passenger trains generally do within a certain degree of schedule, and we're always under the impression we can see and hear that train coming. And as I pointed out, I had in the last couple of weeks 2 experiences where, fortunately, I was off the right of way. I did not hear the trains approaching. We assume that that when there's no gate and there's a passive crossing device like a crossbuck or a sign, that there's negligible train traffic. That's a misconception. I've seen crossings where there could be 20 trains in an hour, and all they had was a passive sign. And trains, of course, provide that kind of illusion. Let's look at that a little bit. To detect speed or time to prevent a collision, it's been found not only in railroading but in aviation that we tend, from our visual point of perspective, we tend to underestimate the speed of large objects. Many studies have been done, and one of the significant pieces of work in this area had no study was done. This was hypothesized by Berkowitz, and it's called the Berkowitz hypothesis, and it's based on information. He hypothesized the concept that a large object we cannot judge its speed, and he's been certainly verified that we tend to misjudge train speed, just as when you go in an airport area and you look up and you see an airplane and it's standing still, even though it's maybe going 300-400 miles an hour. And this misjudgment is a result of our human vision system and our inability to properly judge large objects. Recently, in 2003 and 2006, 2 research groups confirmed Berkowitz concepts, and we now know that this is a fact, that we just now cannot judge in any meaningful way the speed of a train that is approaching us. Everybody thinks that, you stand out there in the right of way, the train sees you and it's going to stop. Take a typical freight train. The train could be a mile long, could weigh 10 million pounds, and could be moving at 55 miles an hour. And for that train to stop, it takes 18 football fields. And of course, when a freight train is coming, there's no question who has the right of way to grade crossing. Stopping distance is the distance between the time a vehicle or pedestrian is detected and the emergency brakes are applied and the train stops. And many times it's almost impossible for the train to stop efficiently before reaching that railroad crossing. The time to stop the train is the time that whatever is in the right of way is perceived, and the braking deceleration time. So it's the combination of braking and reaction time. When one is approaching the crossing, you've got to recognize that there's a crossing ahead, and as you approach that crossing, hopefully there is enough sight distance, and you begin to search for trains or signals, and then decide what proper course of action to take. Should I cross the crossing, or should I wait until the train that I feel is approaching has reached the crossing? So there's this decision point. When you reach that decision point, it's a question of no go or go. These are some examples of typical crossings. We have on an angle, we have a right angle, and we have what we call the obtuse or the acute angles. So these are the right angle, of course, is a much easier crossing than the other two, but these all exist out there and must be taken into consideration. There's a hazard zone out there, and that's where a vehicle approaching the crossing will collide with approaching a stopped vehicle, or a stopped train, or a train attempting to stop. This is what we call this hazard zone. In terms of our peripheral vision, we tend to have this 30-degree cone where we have good vision, and then this remaining, to form the total 180 degrees, we have what peripheral vision. And we tend to be focused in what we call the foveal vision, that 30% area. That's where our attention is focused. Unless we move our head, it's sometimes instinctively we see something in our peripheral vision, but not always. And we have that experience driving a car when a car all of a sudden creeps up on our right-hand side when we're thinking of moving into the left-hand lane, or vice versa, moving into the right-hand lane. These are some observations, the angles as a function of the distance from the grade crossing. The closer we get to the grade crossing, the more vision angle we need, and of course, we have less ability to observe that train that's approaching. It's important to have that sight distance and have vegetation cleared so that we can see in a sufficient amount of time so that we don't get into this hazard zone and we don't create a dangerous situation for ourselves when we approach an intersection. So here's some examples of train speed and how much sight distance is needed at different types of train speeds, at different approaches to that intersection. We need to see sufficiently down the track, especially when we're crossing an intersection, a railroad crossing without a gate. We want to have plenty of time to cross that intersection. We don't want to be cowboys. Even though we know it's a long train, it's better be safe than be sorry. This is the sight triangle, and take into consideration how much distance we need. We can calculate that and make sure that we are able to avoid the obstruction and that we have the proper distance so that we can make the proper decision at that crossing. And of course, it's wise to stop some distance, not at the crossing, but some distance before, and generally 15 feet is a good recommended distance. Here's another chart that gives you train speed and sight distances and also to better understand what that safe distance is to stop before the crossing. Just to give you
Excuse me, Carl. We do have a question. Are the tables that you're putting up about sight distance and stopping distance, are they available through a government agency?
Yes, they are.
And where would the attendees find those resources?
Some of them would, most all of them, some of them you might find in the state highway law, for example, New Jersey Department of Transportation in their handbook for drivers. They have a table in there. The Federal Railroad Administration has a book, and I have that later on, the title of the book, and they can order that from them or download it from online. There are several publications.
Okay.
And I will
Excellent.
cover them
Thank you so much.
a little later on. Not too later on, pretty soon. Basically, I just want to give you perspective in terms of what is involved in terms of speed and distance. If you're going 10 miles an hour, and you're going to need, in 1 second, you're going to move 15 feet. So you're going 100 miles an hour, in 1 second, you're going 150 feet. So you can imagine how fast, let's say an Amtrak train going 125 miles an hour, you can guess how much the train moves in a second. And, a second is just a snap of the finger. And I show it in both ways, both in seconds and in feet. But you just have to multiply, if it's 60 miles an hour, you multiply these numbers by 6. This is the concept of perception reaction time, and what happens in that split second that a vehicle driver or a pedestrian or a train needs to take into consideration to make a decision. A lot of steps, and all this takes place in a matter of a second. The difference between a pedestrian and a vehicle is a pedestrian needs less time to react to a train coming than a vehicle. A vehicle needs a lot more time to make a decision and to react and get out of the way. A pedestrian only needs to react in a fractions of a second to step out of the way of a train, because the track distance is, the distance between the rails is maybe 9 feet, and they need to, if they're in the middle of the track, they need to move 4.5 feet, where the vehicle has to move, 15 to 20 feet or more to get out of the way of the train. This is a little further description on perception reaction time. Even if we have a good process, this doesn't guarantee that there'll be a positive result. Some of the things that go into that perception reaction time, which could be around a second or less, is experience. You may make a misinterpretation, a visual error, fatigue, various other situations can increase that second to multiple seconds, make it a situation even more concerning. How fast can one detect something? No matter what the task is, it also depends somewhat on one's experience. The more experience we have, the better we can react and respond to an unexpected event. Every time I read a report about an accident, whether it's the train operator or the vehicle operator, both of them always state that upon seeing the other, they immediately apply the brakes. Well, if we recall this previous discussion I had about perception and reaction time, and nothing happens immediately. This perception reaction time has to take place before the brakes can be applied. So it's impossible to react instantaneously. There's a perception reaction time which could be as little, maybe 0.6 seconds to 2 or more seconds, depending on the circumstances. And the train operator has a lot of work to do, and information to interpret, recognize situations. It's a very busy job, and even the vehicle operator has a very busy job when they come to a crossing. Most of it takes place from experience, but any failure or degradation of their abilities at this juncture point can result in an accident. Having your attention focused on the circumstances at hand is very, very important. And there's always the question, how many tasks can any operator of a train or a vehicle, how many tasks can they do at one time? How rapidly can an individual switch from one task to another? And how widely can they deploy their attention over the visual field? Not only does this apply to the train operator, it equally applies to the pedestrian and also the vehicle operator. And this is the ability of any individual to apply their attention to the task on hand. I'm not going to get into too much detail. I leave this for your own time to take a look at it further. But this is the different types of categories that come into play in terms of operator and safety, and I'll leave that for you to look at another time. There are many circumstances which can cause human error. Lack of attention, inability to see or hear something, inadequate knowledge for the task at hand, a breach of the rules and regulations or the laws or the traffic rules, using a wrong procedure in a given circumstances, and sometimes all of us know what we talk about slip or lapse, an unintended action or a mental passing. Many of us have ridden on highways and we're driving along and we can't remember how we got to where we are because we've had this mental lapse. We don't know what causes it, but it takes place, unfortunately. And of course, we all tend to push ourselves a little too far, and we get into this fatigue mode where we get tired, our eyes are getting groggy, and we really shouldn't be driving or operating a vehicle or a train. And there are many, many accidents that cause because of this fatigue issue. It's important that every operator be able to control their attention and apply their resources so that they can do the best job to do whatever is needed to be done to cross that particular crossing. And we can do the best, as engineers, we can do the best we can to do what we call safety by design. We can do everything to make sure that the design is the best, but if everybody doesn't do their job, the best design will never solve all problems. It all depends upon all players participating and doing their job equally. And of course, the best and the first level of safety is removing the hazardous condition in the first place, be it the design of the crossing, conditions that might detrimentally affect either the train operator, the vehicle operator, or the pedestrian. If we take away the hazardous conditions in the first place, many of our accidents will go away. Everybody asks the question, what are the standards and practices? Is this the best that we can do? Unfortunately, standards and practices aren't the best we can do because the ultimate standard is the result of a consensus. I serve on several standards committees, the National Standards Institute and the American Standards and Testing Material International, and another testing group. And every time a standard comes up, we may give our input, it gets incorporated into the standard, and then we vote. In order to get a consensus vote, everybody has to agree, or at least a majority, and a minimum number of people have to vote and agree. And if the standard is set too high, we find that the standard will fall, and we don't have any standard at all. So you have to bear in mind that a standard is a consensus. It may not be the best way of doing something in particular, but it's the best we can accomplish. It's the same thing as we see what happens with Congress on their attempt to pass a law or a regulation. They got to get the Democrats and Republicans to agree together. Same thing is with a standard. Some of the standards that have been adopted out there that you can go take a look at, these are all online. The American Public Transit Association.org, APTA. You got to be careful. There are two APTAs out there. One is the American Physical Therapy Association, and the other one is the American Public Transit Association. And I'm sure you won't get those two mixed up, but this is one of the standards that they've developed, and this is in terms of crossing warning systems, design criteria, installation, and operation. And the second one that they have is testing and maintenance of those same devices. And these are very interesting standards. They're available free. You just go to their website, and you go to the standards, pull down, and look for the ones for rail, and you'll find not only these standards, but dozens of other standards that you might find of interest as well for other issues that involve public transportation, especially rail, and they also have the bus. As I mentioned before, there's a Federal Highway and Railroad Administration publication, USDOT. This is the latest edition of this document. It's available in hard copy by writing to the U.S. Department of Transportation, but the easiest way is just to download it and print it. And it's available online. You go to USDOT and put the name of the publication in, or even an easy way of doing it is go to Google, put the name of the publication in, and it'll pop right up. They have it so that it comes up number one on Google. The second publication is the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and this deals with the control devices that are used at intersections, grade crossings, and you can get this also online, and if you want, this is the most recent edition that just came out this past year. If you need older editions because of an older circumstance, you can go back, and in fact, to the other publication as well. You can get the archived copies back 3 or 4 editions of this publication, as well as 2 previous publications of the railroad crossing as well. Some of the accident reduction factors, I've mentioned them before. This is just a summarization. Excuse me for coughing. This is just a repeat of some of the things I mentioned before, just to sort of summarize. As I mentioned before, one of the aspects and one of the reasons that the number of accidents has gone down, we close several thousand crossings a year. This consolidation has resulted in a reduction of accidents. And also when you close the crossings, no longer you have horn noise, and of course there's no blocking of the crossings because it's closed. Important aspect of a safe crossing, and here's an example of a properly designed crossing which is properly paved, and at the crossing area they have special materials, non-skid materials, and safe materials for pedestrians as well. And the flanges they insert a gasket in the flanges so that, for example, if somebody's operating a wheelchair or a cane, crossing with a cane or with crutches, they would not get caught in what we call the flangeway gap. The lower picture is an existing crossing where they've used wooden ties, and you can see what happens over time to these wooden ties if they're not properly maintained. It's important to have a safe crossing, one that's not. These are examples of unsafe crossings. So what we want is something that is not like what I described here. We want it to be smooth and stable. We want it to be as perpendicular to each other as possible. We want it to have a sufficiently wide crossing width, things of this nature to make the crossing surface safe. There are 2 types of warning systems that I briefly mentioned before. If you're not familiar with what they are, we have the passive, that's signs, markings, roadway markings, things of that nature. We have the active, which are the flashing lights, the gates, and there are other systems coming online, which I'll describe a little later on. Here's some of the signs that are from the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and I think these signs are also in the other highway crossing manual as well. So you can get them both in these signs in two places. And there's a sign out there for almost any situation that might take place at a crossing to properly warn pedestrians, vehicles, and unfortunately not train operators of what the conditions are at that crossing. There's some examples of some of the crossbuck signs that are out there, some with crossing gates and some without, some with lights, some without. Some have yield signs, some have stop signs, and this information is provided in, I believe, in both those publications, the MUTCD and the crossing manual as well. And here's some other examples of crossing signs. In this case, they indicate that it's not one track or two tracks, it's in fact 3 tracks. And this is the multiple track sign, and this is important. As I mentioned before, there have been experiences where a train is stopped before the crossing at a railroad station, and somebody decides to cross, and as they cross, there's a train coming in the other direction behind the train that stopped, and we have serious injuries. In some jurisdictions, trains that are, once a train is in the station, they do not permit the second train from entering the station. This is not universal, but there are various jurisdictions where a train stops in the station, a second train cannot enter that station through a crossing. These are some of the advanced warning signs, and they usually place less than 100 feet of space between them and the track and the roadway. Here's an example of the placement of a crossing sign. This is the pavement markings that you'll typically find. This is laid out in both those publications as well. And you can see in this case, each lane is also, there's a light for each lane. Here's some of the regular...
Oh, we do have a question with regard to signs, signals, and crossings. Would you like to take that now?
Sure.
Okay, great. If an accident is a result of poor maintenance of signs, signals, and crossing, is it preempted by federal law?
No. Federal law only preempts state law and sets standards, but these are all federal standards. And if the gate fails, there's an obligation to repair it. There's an obligation to replace the signs. It depends. There is multiple jurisdictions. It may be the railroad. It may be the government. But the intersection has to be maintained. The federal law, every track is classified. So, for example, the speed that the train operates on the track is set by the class that the Federal Railroad Administration sets. So that's a preemption. But when poor maintenance, I don't recall seeing anything in federal law that condones or supports poor maintenance. In fact, it's the other way around.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Here's an example, of a stop line on an obtuse crossing. It's important to have that stop line back far enough so that the vehicle is far enough away from the crossing. Here you see an example of a stop line and a passive warning sign. And here you see here's a little maintenance needed here. These things need to be upgraded on a regular basis. In this case, this would be the responsibility of these both would be the responsibility of the highway jurisdiction. It would be state, county, local, borough, municipality, town, village, what have you. Not generally the railroad. This is an example of not the best way to have a railroad cross a roadway. Nor do you want to have a roadway where you have to go up to cross the roadway and come down. Some of the foreign cars, like the Mini Coupe, have very low undercarriages, And if you have this kind of situation, that vehicle could generally get hung up. You know, not all vehicles are 14 inches off the ground. Some of them are significantly less. And one should never stop on tracks. Private crossings, unfortunately, one of the problems with private crossings, they're not properly, generally they're a private property owner, which is occasionally used, and they may not have the proper notification, you know, what to do at the crossing, and it sometimes could be a safety issue. And there's efforts to eliminate private crossings, but the problem with that is the only accessibility to that private property is across the private crossing. And what happens where crossings aren't properly provided at proper spacings, we have what we might want to call an informal crossing. And we see a lot of these around where school kids especially are crossing the railroad right away at a particular point which is not an official crossing, and over many, many years have established it in their minds as an informal crossing. Here's some of the examples of the active control devices that are out there and can be applied at a crossing. There are many, many different devices out there. This is a picture of a lot of these devices being applied to a crossing, and not only do they have a lot of devices, they create also a lot of confusion. So one can overdo it sometimes by providing too much information, could be overloaded and create as much problems as not providing enough information. So there's got to be some kind of balance in how the crossing is designed and the type of information that is provided and the type of controls that are implemented.
Excuse me, Carl, we've had two questions come in. I was wondering if you'd like to answer them now.
Of course.
Sure. From Matt, we have a question. What about motorcycle crossing tracks and the angle of the track as a possible hazard?
The spacing generally would not pose a problem to the motorcycle. What could possibly provide a problem is if he's changing surfaces, like he's going from a rubberized surface or an asphalt surface or a concrete surface to steel. That could cause some kind of slipping. And might, you know, if the motorcycle operator is not paying attention, the going from one type of friction surface to another can sometimes pose a problem and create a slippy situation for that operator. But generally speaking, motorcycles don't have, they're one of the vehicles that has least amount of problems with crossings because of their ability to act almost like a bicyclist or even like a pedestrian. They could walk it across if they need to, depending on the condition.
Excellent. We have another question here from Lawrence. What electronic data and records are typically available to help reconstruct the accident?
Generally, everybody is under the impression that the only thing that is available is a black box. Actually, there are hundreds of possibilities of information sources. There's the black box that could be in the train operator's cab. Many trains today have a black box in the front of the train, a black box in the back of the train. Railroad crossings have a lot of downloads. The trains, just like automobiles today, have numerous amounts of computer sources and computer chips that read information continuously on the conditions and the operation of the motors and of the engines of the train. I think I've seen lists, and I think one of my colleagues once told me that there could be 300 or 400 possible different kinds of sources of download information that are available, including electronic data, visual data, through cameras, through roadside cameras. Also, there are transponders that are put on along the tracks that are collecting information. That's why it's important to work early on with your expert, because your expert will know about what the available information is, and generally attorneys just ask for the black box information. That's only a drop in the bucket in terms of what information is out there. Does that answer that question?
Thank you, Carl. I don't see any other questions, so let's continue on with the presentation of content.
In many places, particularly in Florida, to prevent vehicles from getting caught in crossing, they have a multi-signal system which has some sort of preemption that keeps the vehicles far from the railroad crossing, a good distance back. So the signals change in such a way that before the train comes, that intersection is fully cleared. And we call that this preemption. There are various systems out there that are being tested. Japan and a number of Japanese companies are a little bit ahead of us. It all comes under this category, what we call intelligent transportation systems. And these systems are out there and able to allow us to predict the train's arrival. And in fact, there's now experimentation where the train and the vehicle are in communication. So that the vehicle, just like when you use these backup cameras or side cameras, there will now be a heads up on the rear view mirror, which will tell you that the train is coming and how many seconds it'll be before that train reaches the intersection. This is great stuff. It's not very expensive, and it's quickly coming. This is the federal laws and the requirements in terms of how much time is required and should be provided at crossings. And this is F49 CFR 234. The full CFR is available online from the U.S. Department of Justice, and I think also the U.S. Department of Transportation as well. So there's several sources of this information, and it's completely, every CFR that the federal government publishes is all available online for download. One of the ways to try to prevent individuals' vehicles from going around gates is what we call these long-arm gates. These cover not just the one side of the roadway, but also they extend into the other side of the roadway as well. This is the typical situation of what we call the gate crasher. This is an actual picture. This was not staged. This is an actual situation. I live in a community in the summer in Long Island, and to get to our community, you have to cross a crossing, which is it's a public crossing. And one of my neighbors, and those are in the business I'm in, did just exactly this because the gate was down so long, and the person got annoyed and had this big SUV and went around the gate. 5 seconds later, the train came through. Lucky person. Another approach to prevent this from happening, they put this medium barrier. You see this medium barrier in both pictures to prevent the vehicles from going around. This has been very effective. This is totally eliminated. Where these have been applied, it is totally eliminated at going around the gate. And one of the reasons that cars go around the gate, trains, not so much freight trains, but passenger trains, there may be a station off stage right or a stage left, and the train may be staying there an exorbitant length of time. It may be the starting point of the train. I have a situation where the train would start at a particular location, and there was a truck terminal, and the trucks always go around the gate or through the signals because the train can sit for 5 or 10 minutes, and because the train is so close and because of the federal regulations, the gate comes down, and the truck can stand there for 5 or 6 minutes. And you know a truck driver is not going to do that. They go around the gate. But the trains are somewhat cognizant of this and keep that in mind. The trains that are at the station, not the trains that are coming into the station.
Excuse me, Carl. We have a question about gates. Jeff asks, does the 5-second rule apply to all gates, even if installed maybe 15 or 20 years ago?
Which 5-second rule are you referring to?
I'll seek clarification on that for you. I'll ask Jeff clarification on that. Okay.
This is the gates in all 4 quadrants of a roadway, whether it's obtuse, acute, or right angle. In case of left turns, this is sometimes a problem where you're driving up a roadway and you want to make a left turn across a railroad crossing, and this generally this is very common in industrial areas, and they were having lots of problems and accidents and situations. So these lights are now installed overhead, which provide guidance to the vehicles before they cross into these industrial parks. This you won't find too much in residential areas, but you find this really in industrial areas, pretty predominant.
Carl, we have a clarification on that 5-second rule. Just says that the gate be horizontal 5 seconds before the train gets there.
It depends on the speed of the train. There's an activation in the track, and I don't know of any 5-second rule. Generally, it's more time than that. I don't remember exactly the CFR, but I don't recall it saying. Let me go back again. Well, I guess it must be in a horizontal position at least 5 seconds, so I guess that is the rule. At least. So this is the federal regulation.
Yeah, we have another question here from Ben who asks, does the 5-second rule apply to on-track vehicles as opposed to the train?
This the gate coming down. This CFR refers to the train. This entire CFR refers to the train. In America, in other parts of the world, it's not the case, but in America, no matter what the situation, the train always has the right of way. In England, and I think I have a picture toward the end, where in England, UK, they have a gate for trains, and the vehicles have the right of way. But I don't know of any place in the United States where the vehicle is given preemption over the train. Would be nice, wouldn't it? In terms of pedestrian solutions, they have these various gate solutions in addition to regular gates, they have physical gates to keep the pedestrians off the right-of-way when the train is approaching the crossing. And these are some examples of pedestrian solutions. And pedestrian warning signs. And pedestrian gates. And this is the dynamic envelope. In terms of where we need to provide protection. This is, a train is a little bit bigger than the track. Generally speaking, this train can measure from 10 feet to 10 feet, 6 or 8 inches. So the track is somewhat less, and you can see where the track is right here. So, standing very close to the track could be a dangerous situation as well. And this is about the conspicuity. These are all the lights on a locomotive, and this has done a tremendous job in reducing accidents at crossings. There's 2 different types of signal preemption. There's the simultaneous and the advanced. I'm not going to get into it because we're running out of time. These are the standards for preemption. And some of the things that must be taken into consideration in terms of designing preemption: is there enough storage space, the traffic volumes, how quickly the vehicles pass through the crossing, the queuing available, how long it takes a pedestrian to cross. We live in the winter in Delray Beach, and we have a crossing, a street crossing of approximately 8 lanes, 7 or 8 lanes, and the crossing, they give you 6 seconds for the pedestrian to cross. And you know what happens. Pedestrians just don't cross because you can't do it. This is the type of thing you find in urbanized areas. It's pre-signaled so that the intersection is kept clear because traffic is stopped long before it gets into the envelope of the crossing area. This is one of the technologies, one that I was describing to you, where the vehicle and the train are all kept in the loop, and one knows about the presence of the other. And this is moving very rapidly. We've been working on this technology for some 10 years, and we're getting very, very close to seeing this actually implemented. It's being tested all over the world right now, actually. One of the ways that we're trying to improve vehicles conforming to the rules and regulations of crossing is using these photo enforcement cameras, which we all know as red light cameras or at the intersections, but we're also using them now to try to identify chronic violators. The people who tend to violate the rules and regulations at crossings tend to be the same people all over and over again. So this ITS Center, Fujitsu, is coming a long way. They're developing a system. Not only will be cars, people, but bicycles and wheelchairs will be identifiable to the train operator. This is great stuff once it gets implemented, and it's not very expensive, and it's being tested in the United States, in Japan, and elsewhere. Motion detection is being used to determine, using motion detection and cameras to detect vehicles and individuals entering the railroad right-of-way. Just like we have collision avoidance systems that are being put into high-end cars like Mercedes and Lexus and Cadillac, the same thing is being done in terms of trains, and those same systems, those collision avoidance systems, will ultimately be effective in terms of railroad crossings as well. That time is coming, and this is not Star Wars stuff. This is immediate stuff that's going to happen. B&B Armor Corporation has developed a gate which, when down, cannot be a vehicle going 40 miles an hour will be delayed and stopped from proceeding. And the technology is somewhat similar to the technology that's used on aircraft carriers to stop airplanes. Is there a bunch more questions that are being asked, Matt?
Well, we have a couple in the queue. Yeah, I was waiting for you to present the content. I was
looking to ask. How about if I finish a couple of slides and we take all the questions?
That's perfect.
Okay. One thing that's interesting: every child in Australia must go to crossing school, and this is a sample of 3 different crossing schools. The only crossing school that I'm familiar with in the United States is one on Long Island, and it's run by a county, and they invite school districts from all over Long Island. It's Brookhaven County. A town, Brookhaven Town, and they run a crossing school. And I mentioned before, there's a gate that's for trains and not for vehicles in the United Kingdom. And these are some non-typical crossings. There's a lot of Samaritan groups out there that are making an effort to try to outreach to children and adults into the safe way of crossing. And, of course, we all have a duty of care, all of us who are involved in the railroad crossings, to make sure they're safe. If you go online and you put in the word crossing ghost, you'll find this ghost crossing, and everybody in the industry believes that this is somebody who, unfortunately, didn't make the crossing and is out there to watch and make sure that everybody who crosses safely. And this particular picture you can find thousands of times on the internet. Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Carl. We have a bunch of questions in the queue for you. From Daniel, who asked, any accident data where quiet zone regulations are in effect?
The Federal Railroad Administration requires it for any accident to be reported to them, and all of that information is available online. Right now, the information is available historically and through November of 2011. Any type of accident and the related cause.
Okay, excellent. A question from Jeff, who asked, does 49 CFR 234 apply to all gates currently in operation?
There are a few gates that are in urban areas that are involving with subways and other, subway rail yards and things like that. And I don't think they are covered by that. Only those railroad tracks that are covered by the Federal Railroad Administration. So subways might not. There's some examples of subways that might not be covered. And I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to check. I'm not sure if urban light rail is covered by that 49 CFR.
Okay, excellent. We have a question here from Ben, who asks, do on-track railroad vehicles have the right-of-way as opposed to trains?
Anything that operates on the track is a train.
Okay. From Daniel, who asks, any standards for requiring an overpass in terms of amount of vehicle traffic or number and frequency of trains and a number of tracks? Are there any standards that talk about that?
Well, there are studies that have been done where, there are sort of guidelines that, help you make that decision. When should you try to eliminate a crossing? The only restriction is very expensive, and most jurisdictions cannot afford to pay for the crossing. I've read articles where some crossings have cost $30 million to eliminate. It can be very,
wow.
very. Don't forget, a roadway can have a grade up to 8%. A train can't operate at a steep grade. Only a cog railroad, like it goes up Pikes Peak or, up in Rio de Janeiro to the famous statue. Those railroads have 30% grade. Railroads need a very slight grade, so you need a long distance to raise the track in order to get it over a crossing or under a crossing. Raise or lower it.
We have a question here from Kenneth who asks, can you discuss the duties and obligations of the train operator when he sees a pedestrian on the tracks at a crossing that he is approaching?
That's a good question. There is no, the train always has the right of way, and generally the train operators, when a pedestrian is crossing, will indicate that by the time they saw that person crossing, it was too late to do anything. I think that the train is allowed to operate at the speed that the track is classified on, but it would seem to me that if a train operator knows that pedestrians are crossing at a location, that there should be the train company and the train operator and everybody involved should be prudent in that situation and should act accordingly. I mean, because you're allowed to do something doesn't mean you should do it. I know that's not quite the answer, but the train is allowed to go the speed that the track is classified at. Or
okay,
there's one exception. Some tracks have posted speed because of curvature or other situations. So then they were obligated to go at that posted speed. But if there's no posted speed, it's the track speed.
Okay, great. We have two more questions, and then we'll wrap up today's presentation. John asks, are there any requirements for the crossing placards?
The standards, those two manuals that I gave you outline all the standard requirements. Those are the standards. The only ones that are exempted from those standards are private crossings.
Okay, our final question for today is from Leonard, who asks, are there any regulations regarding lighting requirements at crossings?
There are suggestions and recommendations. Specifically, it's a good idea, but it's not. It's not always. It's not a requirement. Street lighting.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carl, for your wonderful presentation, and thank you to all the attendees who took time out of your busy schedule to join us for today's program. If you'd like to speak to Dr. Carl Berkowitz about a case or project that you're working on, you can contact me here at TASA. My email is up on the screen, and my telephone number is 800-523-2319. In April, Dr. Berkowitz will be presenting another program on passenger terminal safety, and then in May, Dr. Berkowitz will present a webinar on bus occupant accidents. I will make sure that each one of you receives an invitation to those programs. Tomorrow morning, I will be sending out an email with a link to the archived recording of this program. As part of that email, I will attach a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was used during today's program. The archived recording will also be posted in TASA's Knowledge Center. To view TASA's Knowledge Center, go to our website, www.tasanet.com, and click on the Knowledge Center tab, which is found in the top-level navigation, to be able to find all of our previous webinars there. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, we do take everyone's comments under consideration, and they help us to produce better programs. Please feel free to send me an email at mhyde@tasanet.com. You will be receiving a thank you for attending email from me today at 3:30 p.m. Please feel free to respond to that email with any questions or comments that you may have. On behalf of everyone here at TASA, I thank Dr. Berkowitz for his time and effort that he put into this presentation, and I thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with us. I'm now going to end today's webinar.